Hello, fellow fantasy sports fans. Welcome to MFSN, the Hub's fantasy baseball draft show. Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. I'm here as always with Casey, Vlad to the Bone Scheinvold, and Ross the Boss.
Hi, everybody. Ross the Boss coming live from La, California. And yes, spring training has started. Big news out of LA. Ohtani is DHing tomorrow for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Again, not a Dodger fan, but I do like watching Ohtani play. But all that being said, we're talking about third base, something I never got to in high school. I'll be talking about that, Dan? No.
I knew you were going to go there.
Of course. But I made fun of myself there. I didn't do it with you.
I appreciate that.
I talked about myself. But yes, third base, and I've been up all week talking and doing my stats, getting everything together. And Casey too. We're excited.
So I'll just say this, guys. I mean, we've done catcher. We did first base. I came in thinking catcher was thin, but now looking at it, I'm like, first base was even thinner, and third base is every bit as thin. I don't know what's going on, but it's top heavy, but not even in that exciting a way. I don't know. We always talk about tiers first, so let's do that. Who's in your top tier? How many numbers?
Oh gosh,
just one.
Yeah, I'm doing one guy in the top tier, and I'll give you a clue. He plays in your hometown.
I think we're all on the same page with who that top tier is. The only thing I'll add is that Vladimir Guerrero does qualify at third base.
Casey and I were talking about that. He played 10 games last season at third base.
But here's the thing anyway.
I'm not talking about him
you're drafting Vladimir Guerrero as a first baseman primarily. Okay. I mean, so we're gonna assume that he's not in the mix here. So we all have Jose Ramirez as the top tier. Why is he head and shoulders above the rest? I agree, but I want to hear what you guys have to say about it.
Well, I mean, he's a pencil him in 5 category contributor who's done it year in and year out. I mean, a little disappointing in 2023, and then people started to write him off. So what does he do in 2024? But puts up 30, 40 numbers, something ridiculous like that. He does it all, and he doesn't need lineup protection to do it. Like, Cleveland's offense is not that impressive, and regardless of that, he still scores over 100 runs, knocks in 80 runs, steals 40-plus bags, hits 30 home runs, bats in the 280s, 290s, and sometimes crests 300. It's the consistency and predictability of him alone makes him the most valuable third baseman, and arguably probably one of the 4 or 5 most valuable fantasy baseball players in the entire league.
Well, you won me over very early in that argument, but not that I was resisting much. But, another nice thing I like about Jose Ramirez is that he's playing in a lineup that isn't even that good, but he's already done it. He does it in lineups
every year.
That good every year, so you don't have to worry about that. Ross, do you have anything to add about the Jose Ramirez
Cleveland,
argument?
I want to go back what you said. Cleveland's lineup is pretty good. I don't know what you're looking at, but I have them winning the Central in American League.
I think they'll win the Central. I'm just saying
but
they
I
don't
don't
have the most potent lineup. It's not like they're loaded like the Yankees or something.
Who are their second and third best hitters after Jose Ramirez?
Well, I like
Steven Kwan. Okay,
well,
but
Kwan's great.
But he's a 2-category contributor. Like, he's a batting average and run scored at best.
Yes, but from a fantasy perspective, he's going to be on base a ton.
Right, he helps.
So that helps.
But I mean, last year was Naylor their second best hitter, probably, and
Naylor was number 2.
Yep, and he's gone now.
Omar Vizquel, I like. Is he still playing?
I love Vizquel. I love Albert Bell, Kenny Lofton. I mean, the greats. But let's talk about present day.
Okay.
So I mean, who legitimately after Jose Ramirez and Kwan, who's the third best Guardians hitter?
Oof. That's a good question.
See, and if you have to think that hard, that speaks to my point. I'm not saying they're terrible. And listen, this team has a way of getting so much out of not that much, actually. And we've got some young players like Kyle Manzardo who I think are going to be quite good. They'll find a way.
I mean, Brian Rocchio was a good defensive player. How did he do offensively?
Well, I mean, listen, the next best hitter that we brought in was Lane Thomas last year.
Right, and Carlos Santana. I mean, he's a good on-base guy, but he's not.
I don't even know if I'd say he's that good of an on-base guy at this point. Anyways, point being, Jose Ramirez is he can get through any lineup situation. He's immune to that.
Right.
Take him number 1 at third base. All right, let's talk about the second tier. How many do you guys have in that second tier?
I have 3.
This. I have 4-ish.
3-ish.
And I have 4-ish also. It's really interesting that we need to qualify it with that, because the reason I say the ish part is that I feel much stronger about the top half of the tier, and yet they still do kind of morph into the same tier. So Ross, start us off with, let's say that the next 2 guys you have.
I mean, the next 2 guys, this guy was hurt a lot of the time last year. He plays in Atlanta, which is a great place to be a hitter at, and that's Austin Riley. Austin Riley is always around. If he's healthy, 40 home runs-ish. Ish is going to be our word for the day. Ish.
Yeah.
So 40 home run-ish, 100 RBIs. He plays in that lineup is loaded. I can tell you 1, 2, 9.
That's a deep lineup.
And then number 2, a lot of controversy right now going on with him because he wants to play third base, is Rafael Devers. And you guys know the story. They signed Alec Bregman. Bregman, first day of practice, they say, Bregman, get at third base. And Devers is like, what's going on here? So I think they cleared it up. I think Bregman's going to play second, right, Casey? And they're putting
that's the rumor. Yep,
that's the rumor. But Rafael Devers and Austin Riley, their numbers are very similar. If you look in the past 3 years, I was looking at that today, and I mean, you can't go wrong with either of those guys. But those are my next 2 guys that I like.
Okay, and I have the same thing. I have Devers ahead of Riley. They're very close.
I mean, they can flip flop. I mean, I don't think they're that off with each other. So.
Yep. Case, what about you?
I have Riley, then Devers, but I have them 3 and 4 because, again, they both had bad years and they're bounce back candidates, and I agree. And they certainly will, I think, finish above the guy I have number 2, because number 2, it's more wishful thinking. And based on his injury history looks really bad.
But I know who you're talking about.
But it's Jazz Chisholm.
Oh, okay.
See that.
Jazz Chisholm, if you look at after he got traded to the Yankees, his 162 game pace before he got the UCL sprain in his left elbow was 99 runs, 39 homers, 81 RBIs, 63 steals.
That's pinball numbers.
Right. It's crazy. Could he have sustained those numbers? Absolutely not. But even if he slowed down a bit, he's the only one, minus the batting average, who could give you the number of categories in a way that José Ramírez can. And so I think I had those 3, and I also have Manny Machado on that second tier, but he's kind of a dangling participle there at the end.
Exactly where I am.
But I think of those 3 players, the one with the highest ceiling is Jazz Chisholm, but he's also the one with the lowest floor.
I think that's a really good analysis. That's why I have him at number 4. I mean, I looked at him and, it's tantalizing numbers, especially with those stolen bases.
And in that Yankees lineup and in Yankee Stadium, it's crazy.
For sure. If he wasn't an injury risk, I think he'd be probably the clear number 2. But, he's got some injury risk.
And ironically, 3 of the guys on the list are going to qualify for second base if they don't already by the 3rd week of the season. And I'd love to have him as my second baseman because it's also a very thin position.
I mean, we got a lot of thin positions to go around. I don't know what that signifies exactly. Maybe baseball teams, like in real life, have gotten the message like we gotta diversify here. We gotta have players who can play different positions. So it's kind of like in fantasy football. There aren't those bell cow running backs as much anymore. We don't have those in positions at baseball as well. There's a lot of guys
far between. Yeah,
it's really hard to find. I totally agree with Chisholm at the top. I also totally agree with you on the Manny Machado thing. I was like, he
but
can
he still
fit in.
Does it?
No,
but he's so old, and it's just the same. He plays in San Diego. San Diego's a horrible place for a hitter to play. We know this.
It's true.
It's a horrible stadium for hitters.
He's had between 28 and 32 home runs in 5 straight seasons.
He's just so much more consistent than
the truth. It's just I can't draft him anymore. I can't do it. I can't put myself up to it. Jazz Chisholm, I really think he's a 30-30 guy this year. If he stays healthy and Casey and plays 150 games, I think he can steal 30 bases, hit 30 home runs, and I think this guy's legitimately could be in the talks for MVP. I'm on the same page. That's a great pick by you. And Jazz Chisholm Jr., He's a junior. Just his dad
It's
is
important to know,
which I love. I love that name, Jazz. I want to name my son that when my next kid, but I'm not going to have any more kids. So there you go.
You can just rename your son that.
I can
just call him that. You could just call him that.
But yeah. I think that's a great pick by you. But Manny Machado, I'm going to say no on.
All right. So Ross, where do you have Manny Machado in your rankings?
I just honestly, in my ratings, I have him out of the top 10. I don't.
Oh wow.
I don't like him. I just think he's
clearly.
Yeah, I just think he's going to get hurt. I think I'm just talking about fantasy. I'm not saying like
I know.
Team, but I mean, there's other guys that I like a lot better that we can talk about that's on my next tier.
All right, let's do that in a second, Ross. But let's just finish off the Manny Machado thing.
Manny Machado. My recommendation for all the listeners is not to draft him.
Interesting, and I think Casey and I feel like he's a strong value. He's not as good as that rest of that tier. I actually see him far ahead of everybody below him.
Except he'll be on the bench in the IL and not playing half the season. But go ahead, draft him.
All right, now we're gonna look. This is a prediction for us to remember. Okay, Ross was very gung ho about this. Casey and I were in a different camp, and maybe Ross is gonna be totally right. We're gonna see. All right, so Ross, I'll let you go right into your next tier because you were all excited about it. You were all jazzed.
Jazz Jr.
That's right.
This guy. I remember watching Mets games, and anytime the Mets needed a hit or a home run, this guy always got it. I mean, this guy was like money throughout the year. And I said, next season, I'm going to draft this guy in some of my leagues because I love watching this guy play. He doesn't steal any bases. He's one of the slowest guys out there. But Matt Vientos this guy is the real deal. And that lineup in New York with the Mets, they have a really good lineup in New York. And I have the Mets winning their division this year. How about that? But Matt Vientos to me is really good, and it's somebody that I would draft above Manny Machado. How about that?
I think it's fine. I mean, I do want to point out his name is Mark. It's
Vientos.
Manny Machado. You guys mix me.
I know we screwed you up. It's not your fault, Ross.
Vientos of the Mets, and another guy I think is going to have a big season, and he just signed a big deal is Alex Bregman. I mean, Alex Bregman. In Boston, playing those short fences, and especially the Red Sox are revitalized. I mean, they have a good team this year. They're going to win over 80 games this year, Casey. How about that?
Hey, I hope they don't.
I hope they don't either. I hate the Red Sox, one of my most hated teams. But Alex Bregman, I think he's going to be in the middle of that lineup. And I think this guy's going to just start hitting what we saw a few years ago before he got hurt.
And you think he's going to really return to form?
I think he's going to be in form. I think Boston's going to revitalize him. And remember that East Division with the ballparks they play in, Baltimore, Yankee Stadium, Fenway Park, even Toronto, those stadiums are easy places that hit home runs. In case you know I'm right. You watch a lot of AL East baseball games, and the ball flies out of there in the summer. I mean,
yeah, but it doesn't exactly like not fly out of Petco out of Houston either, which is the best power park for right-handed hitting. So
right, and that's where he was.
But I agree with you. I have Bregman ranked 7th.
That's fine.
I don't have Vientos in my top 10, and that might be a bit of a shock.
All right, now I have Bregman at number 6, okay. And I don't have Vientos in my top 10, but I do have him as a sleeper. I was watching out for him. I mean, he's a very underrated player and one that no one really is talking about as far as I can tell, other than Ross. I'll give you credit. So my number 6 was Bregman, but Casey, sounds like you had somebody above Bregman.
Yeah, Casey,
I have Jordan Westberg at 6.
Oh, nice. I have him at 8.
I love that kid. His underlying metrics with quality of contact, and I mean, he's not going to have big power, but he's going to have legitimate power. That Baltimore lineup is one of those exciting ones where they're aggressive and they score a lot of runs and they push their base runners.
I like that pick.
I think, but again, along with Jazz Chisholm, I said there were 3: Jazz Chisholm, Alex Bregman, and Jordan Westberg. All are going to qualify at second base if they don't already by the middle of April. And so you're getting that positional versatility with them also, which I think pushes their value even higher, because think about it. A lot of leagues have all the positions, but then they have corner infielder, middle infielder, so if you get a guy who plays third and second, you get those 2 positions, plus you get corner infield, plus you get middle infield. And that versatility to me makes them even more valuable than somebody like Manny Machado, who's only going to play third base and only qualify there.
That's a really good point. I mean, I have Manny Machado ahead of Jordan Westburg, but you're arguing Jordan Westburg up the charts for me because it's like,
right.
wait, why am I doing this? I mean, Westburg has more upside, and he's going to qualify at second base also plays in a better, I think, a better lineup overall, and certainly
now these are all for redraft leagues. Obviously, for dynasty or keeper leagues,
you don't take Manny Machado anywhere
Manny
near.
Machado's not anywhere near our top 10.
They were with Ross. So you convinced me to bump Westburg all the way up to 6.
There you go.
I was like, yeah. So I have Bregman next. Now here's a guy that I always end up relying on this guy, Eugenio Suarez.
I have him as a value.
He is a value, but he's more than a value. This guy puts up monster numbers, and here's the thing: he's going to suck for a month and a half.
Yeah.
You need to know that. You need to know
he's similar in that way to Edwin Encarnacion. Remember, he would start off the April and the beginning of May. He's batting like 104 with nothing. And then he goes on this tear for 3 months where he's the best hitter in baseball.
Right. So if you're going to draft Eugenio Suarez, have a backup plan at the beginning. But when he gets hot, you're going to want him in your lineup. He's a monster.
Yeah.
Ross, what do you think about that?
Suarez, he's an ex-Cincinnati Red. He plays in Arizona, which is a great place to hit. And I like him. He's a home run RBI guy. He's going to kill you in batting average.
Especially early.
He does strike out a lot. And like you said, you're right on the money like usual. His April and May numbers are horrible, but he picks it up when it gets hotter. He gets hot. And if you have the patience to wait on him, draft him. But so here you can get him late though. You don't have to.
You can get him late, but here's the other thing. You can probably get him on waivers later.
There you go.
Because somebody's going to cut him. They're going to be so mad that they even have him.
Yeah.
Don't sleep on Eugenio Suarez starting in June. Every year he does this. So my plan is if I can get him at I'm not going to overpay for him.
No.
But if I can get him at a decent rate where I need him to be, I'm going to draft him and I'm just going to wait out those first couple months and then I will plug him in and he'll be a monster. I do it every year. You can also just trade for him. If somebody else drafts him, great. They're gonna trade him for peanuts by the time you get
3 weeks into the season. He'll be the most frustrating player on their roster. So
you could deal almost anybody. All right, Ross, who do you have rounding out your top 10?
I love this guy, and he played in Miami last year, and he was traded to Texas. And his career batting average in the past few years is 250, which is average. He's hitting above the league average, but he had some runs. It's Jake Bakenberger, and Bakenberger, he can hit, and his barrel rate is big. This guy can hit home runs, especially in Texas, and I think he'll have 30 home runs this year, at least, and maybe 90, 100 RBIs, and that's why I have him like so far ahead of some other players, just because he'll produce in the power numbers. He's not going to steal you many bases. He's not going to hit you for average that much. He won't hurt you. But I love Jake Bakenberger, which I just named his nickname, and you guys will call him the same thing throughout the season. How about
we will call him Bakenberger forever.
He's now known as Bakenberger.
I mean, what do you guys think about Bakenberger? Do you think it's would you draft him as, do you think he's a top 10 guy, Casey? Yes or no?
I don't have him in my top 10. I have him as a value pick because he is a little bit one-dimensional in terms of home runs. He doesn't, despite hitting 30 home runs, he doesn't put up a ton of RBIs. He's going to bat. If he can bat 250, that's awesome because that won't kill you. He strikes out a ton. So I also talked about him last week when we talked about first base. I put him in as one of the guys I would take above some of the ones we were talking about. So I like him. I would look at him as a first baseman because another guy I have in my top 10 is Josh Jung, who is the third baseman for the Texas Rangers. And I just think, look, this guy was in 2023, he was on a pace for 30 home runs, 100 RBIs, 100 run scores before he fractured his thumb getting hit by a pitch. Last year, he was putting up numbers again until he got hit by a pitch and fractured his wrist. We're not talking about soft tissue injuries. We're not talking about kind of a guy with an injury record where it's like, oh, he got this muscle tear or the hip flexor you always hear with, or the back issues. Like, these are freak accident injuries. I don't see him as injury prone. And so, like, I love the guy. I think, is he going to be a batting average guy? Probably not. We're talking 250, 260, but I mean, in that ballpark with that potential, and he's done it before for periods of time. I just think he's so young. He's putting it together. I have him there. So that's who I think of as a third baseman.
Now, hold on. There's somebody that is in my top 10 I have not mentioned. I just want to throw it out there because this guy, if he stays healthy, I have him like MVP talking, but I'm worried about his health. That's why I don't have him so high.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
And it's Royce Lewis of Minnesota.
I have him number 8.
You were all over Royce Lewis last year. That's all you talked about. Every show was Royce
2
Lewis.
years ago,
Royce Lewis that. I wonder what he's eating for dinner. I wonder what he's doing today.
Yeah, I wonder if he'll ever
come over.
Why won't he respond to my DMs? I don't know.
Yeah, why does he? I call him and I try to have
I told him what my favorite flower was.
But Royce Lewis, guys, I love Royce Lewis. I mean, remember when he came back and he was like grand slams and home runs?
Oh, yeah.
Remember that Terry had? We talked about it.
I mean, if he stays healthy, he's a monster.
Well, yeah, I mean, he played 152 games so far in the league, and he's got 270 average with 33 home runs, 104 RBIs, 81 runs, 6 steals. So
yeah, I mean, he's going to give you the monster numbers for a whole season. It's just going to take 2 seasons.
It just takes 3, actually.
3.
I do like him. I think that's one of my value picks because I don't think he'll go that early in the draft.
People are scared of him. Yeah,
but people are scared. But I will draft him in at least one league, at least one. I will have him as my starting third baseman.
I like both of those picks. I actually have Royce Lewis 9 and I have Josh Jung 10. And you know,
I have Lewis 8 and Jung 10.
Okay, and the reason that I have them above Jake Baconburger is simply because you can get Burger later. You know,
yeah, we can get
that. Always
sizzle.
get a burger.
We can get sizzle.
I mean, you can always get a burger. But I do agree with Ross that he's a great value pick, and I would love him. I mean, if I'm going to draft Eugenio Suarez, then I'm going to grab Jake Burger as well because, like, great. I'll pair those together.
Maybe one of them's hot when the other one's not.
Yes, although chances are they'll probably be cold at the same time.
Yeah,
but
especially if you draft them.
You know, burgers are not a dish best served cold. But all right, we've got our top 10. Let's talk about sleepers, and we'll do values and then busts. Give me 1 or 2 sleepers that you guys have. Casey, we'll start with you.
I'm going to name Matt Shaw, third baseman for the Chicago Cubs. He was traded over from the Dodgers, 2 years ago, I think, or maybe the beginning of last year. Likely going to get a long leash in Chicago. They traded Paredes back to Houston as part of the Kyle Tucker trade, so they don't have a third baseman in front of them. 17% career strikeout rate in professional baseball. That's pretty darn low. So he's a good contact guy, doesn't strike out a lot, decent power speed. He could be sneaky, especially when the weather gets warm there in Wrigley. There's a lot of potential there for him.
And I just think it's a good idea to have a guy like Matt Shaw on your bench anyway. You know, like take a couple of flyers. I don't even call them flyers, but like look for these sleepers in the back end of your draft because when they start coming in, they could provide significant value. Ross, who do you have at sleeper?
You know, he was hurt all year last year, and I always kept him on my IL, hoping he'd come back, and he didn't come back till like September. Is Junior Caminero of the Tampa Bay Lightning? I'm just kidding. The Tampa Bay Rays. I want to make sure you guys are listening. And
yes, we're here.
Junior, I love his name. Junior, it's his name. This guy can be a 30 home run hitter easily. I mean, if he stays healthy, 30 home runs. And again, not that many people know about him because he plays in a small market, has not showcased his skills that much in Major League Baseball. Minor league, yes. Major league, really not. I mean, he played 50 games. That's not that many. But I feel this guy can really break out this year, and you can get him really late in the draft. And, you know, if you have him starting on your team, I don't think he's not going to hurt you. I mean, he's not going to hit like 100. He's going to hit 250, 260, and he's going to have some power.
And he's got a lot of upside. Well,
his ceiling is Austin Riley-esque, you know, a decent batting average with crazy power, and he can drive in runs. He hasn't even turned 22 yet. He'll turn 22, I believe, in July.
You know what's funny about Junior Caminero is that you can get him later in the draft this year than last year.
Yeah, last year he was all the buzz, but
hype.
Played 43 games this year and didn't really light it up, so that scared some people.
Well, I think, you know, I think for drafting this year, the Rays did us a favor because they held him back for long enough that people didn't get a good look at him. They've kind of forgotten about him. He's a great I mean, you could call him a post-type sleeper. I don't know if he's actually at that point.
I don't think he's there yet, but if
he's not there
if he
yet,
struggles this year, he's definitely
then
there.
he gets there. But I agree with Ross. He's actually number one on my sleeper list. I was just like eyeballing this guy the whole way. You also mentioned Davison De Los Santos when we talked about first base.
Yes,
I have him as a sleeper here as well. I mean, either position, but you want to watch out for this kid. I mean, and listen, if you're looking for sleepers and you're not sure who to get, go look at the prospects that people are raving about. It's amazing that the talent scouting that people have, they often hit on these. So pay attention. He's a guy to look at. Let's look at value picks. We mentioned some of them already. Ross, give us maybe one guy that we haven't talked about yet.
Somebody we haven't talked about is Connor Norby of the Marlins. He's a young stud. He's going to have 20, 25 home runs, probably 10 to 15 stolen bases. And he's just one of these guys that a lot of hype, but I think he'll play every day in Miami. I see him as the everyday third baseman or maybe even second base. But Connor Norby, for fantasy purposes, I think he'll do well. I really do. And it's somebody that you can probably get off waivers after your draft is done.
Right.
But
people don't even have him on the radar.
Yeah, I mean, again, I really dug deep, but I like this kid. And I know Casey talked about him last year when we talked about rookies and stuff. But I think it's all about playing time, and if he gets to play every day, he'll put up the numbers.
Yeah.
Case, who else would you add as values that either we haven't talked about or you want to highlight again?
Well, I like Connor Norby. I kind of think of him as like Spencer Steer. That's kind of what you're looking for, but you can get him 10 rounds later than you can get Spencer Steer. So I think that's nice. I actually don't think Matt Chapman is that bad of a value. No, he's not going to help you in batting average. He's going to hit 240 to 250, which doesn't, as sad as it sounds, and we keep saying it, hurt you as much as you think it does in batting average. But last year, 27 home runs, 15 stolen bases. Those are good numbers. Almost 100 runs scored with 98, almost 80 RBIs with 78. And you can get him, as like third baseman 14 off the board or 15 off the board. And so that's pretty impressive and not a bad value when you grab him. So that's somebody I would put there.
I'll add two guys. We talked about Alec Baum when we did first base, but he does qualify at third base. He's a really solid player. He's in a great lineup. He's not going to hit for as much power as you'd like, but he's going to drive in a lot of runs. So he's somebody that you can rely on. And on the opposite end of the spectrum is Max Muncy. He's going to crush the ball. He's going to hit a ton of home runs, but his batting average is going to be terrible. Yeah. So I also worry about playing time in that lineup. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I find if you can get him at a good value, I'd snag him. Now, let's finish up here on busts. Who are some players that you're staying away from entirely? Ross, we'll start with you.
Somebody we didn't talk about, and I still think he'll be a bust this year again. Well, last year he hit 272. It's not bad. Nolan Arenado.
He's my number one bust.
I mean, this guy, they're trying to trade him. No one wants that contract. I mean, St. Louis said he's on the table. And
there is one person who wants the contract. It's Nolan Arenado.
Yeah, I'm
otherwise
kidding.
No.
But I mean, there was speculation he might come to LA because he's, he has some.
He's
ties
a West
here.
Coast kid.
But there you go. But I mean, I don't see anybody jumping up and down saying we need you on our team. He's 34 years old. It's not like he's that old. It's the problem with him.
Well, you just described Manny Machado as super old at 32.
I have to. I mean, that's what
as
I
long
do.
as long as we're aware of the double standard.
That's what I do. But Nolan Arenado for me is going to be
as long as the hypocrisy is acknowledged.
I just feel he's going to be big. Well, that's what I feel. Nolan. Also, you mentioned it earlier. I think Max Muncy is not going to be starting by All-Star break. I think they'll bring up one of their young guys.
I could see that. I wouldn't pay a lot for him.
Is Muncy a third baseman or is he a second baseman?
He plays third base.
Third.
They have I forgot who's playing second, but Muncy's their third baseman, I believe. They moved Mookie to shortstop. I don't know if you know that, Casey.
I know, and he's going to be the top 3 shortstop in fantasy.
Yeah, we'll talk about that soon.
He's crazy.
But Muncy, God, last year again, I'm not a Dodger fan, but last year, every time the Dodgers had the bases juiced or they had the game-winning RBI somewhere, he would strike out. I mean, he was not a good hitter under pressure last year. He was horrible.
He reminds me of Josh Naylor.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't that
An
great.
older Josh Naylor. But I have Nolan Arenado as my number one bust, but it's also just because of his name recognition. There's so many people who they're like, oh, remember he was a star. He's going to come back.
All-star.
I don't think Nolan Arenado's coming
see,
back.
when I'm looking at busts, I'm not. And this is what got me in trouble last year in the shortstop position, by the way. I'm not saying I think they're going to be a bust. I'm saying the risk for where you have to take them makes it a bad pick. And so I put Jazz Chisholm and Royce Lewis. I just, because look, I have him ranked as my number 2 third baseman, which means you'd have to take him in the top 3 rounds to get him. And there's a good chance that he goes on the IL and misses 75 games. And it's
too much risk. I mean, there's lots of ways.
I'm not saying he's going to be a bust. I'm saying that pick is most likely to end up a bust because of where you have to take him. And Royce Lewis is the same way. I love Royce Lewis. I've talked about him for 2 years now, but I'm certainly not drafting him at his ADP right now because he's never stayed healthy for more than an 11 game stretch. It feels like. So those are my 2 guys I have on my list.
Makes perfect sense to me. All right, guys, we got to wrap up for today. Next week, we're going to do either second base, shortstop, or we're going to do both. I think we might do both. So we'll make that decision.
Can we just preview something? Casey will not be taking De La Cruz as a bust this year.
Probably not. He won't be on my bust list.
I think he has learned his
lesson.
Off
the bust list.
Yes, he's climbed off the bust list. All right, guys, it was a great show. Thanks for being here, Casey and Ross. Thank you for watching, everybody out there. Keep prepping. You need to keep up with these draft positions so that you're ready, because drafts are coming up really soon. Remember, the first day of baseball is March 18th, so most teams are going to be drafted by then. We're going to cram these in the next couple weeks to make sure that you get all the information you need. Next week should be second base and shortstop. Then we'll move to outfield. Okay, guys, great show. Thanks, Casey. Thank you, Ross.